Hey fellow backyard boyers, Nick here. Today I wanted to show this new crossbow to you guys. I've been getting a lot of questions about crossbows, and I've also been getting a lot of requests to do another crossbow video. So I figured I'd show this to you guys. This is one of my favorite styles of crossbow, and I've made several of this style. I'm not a huge fan of moving parts like I've mentioned before, and so I really like simple trigger mechanisms. Now this mechanism is good for lower poundage bows like this one. This is only a 100-pound prod. And I just wanted to talk to you guys about this today. So first thing is the trigger mechanism or the lock. This is really simple. Some people call it a push pin lock or a Skane lock. All it really is a pin inside of here. When the string comes back, it engages the lock by pushing the pin down. Move this, you can see when the string comes back, it pushes the pin down. And then when you're ready to shoot the crossbow, you push up on the handle and it pushes the pin and it pushes the string. This is really good for lower poundage bows. As you get higher up past about 150 pounds, it can get really tricky to get this system working really well. This is really nice, not a lot of wear on the parts, even without, heavy rounding or anything. And some of the things I've done with this bow is I have a PVC bolt retainer. This is just a little clip that holds the bolt in place. And also, you see here, there's a little stop that keeps the bolt from going back over the string and helps prevent misfires. And if you don't like this here, you want to shoot without it, or you want to use some kind of a spanning aid, you can just move this around out of the way or take it off. Now the main trigger is basically this bar. It's made out of PVC pipe, and this acts as both a spring and a lever. It holds itself up, but it's also light enough where the string can actually push it down. Now this is a really, a very light trigger because it's also trying to pull itself up. So dropping this will accidentally let the bolt go, and that's never a good thing. So I've also put a safety on here. It's just a really simple little bar. This is also made out of PVC. It slides up and goes right underneath the trigger. That way when the string is in here and it pushes the pin down, the pin makes contact here. But no matter what you do, you can't actually get the crossbow to shoot. Even if you were to drop this, the bolt will have a hard time going. Now it could always happen, but this is just an extra layer of safety. Up here I have the prod. This is a 100-pound 1-inch PVC pipe prod. Now you guys remember I did a video on how to make a 100-pound crossbow, and that thing was fairly large. This is much more compact, a lot smaller. And to get this bow to draw this far and this heavy, it's got a lot of deflects in it. So the performance, even though it's a smaller bow and it's a more efficient bow, the performance is about the same as the other bow. It shoots its bolts at about 150 feet per second. Now, one thing I just wanted to mention is that when we're talking about crossbows, 100 pounds is a fairly lightweight, especially with a short power stroke here. The shorter the power stroke, the heavier your bow needs to be to propel the arrow. And generally for bows like this, I like to say that a crossbow like this at 100 pounds is about comparable to a longbow or recurve bow of about 30 to 40 pounds. So 100 pounds may seem like a lot, but this is actually a fairly lightweight bow. But it's fun to shoot, it's easy to pull for most people with two hands and a stirrup. And it's a lot of fun for backyard shooting and just having a blast. It's a really cool little crossbow. Up here I have my stirrup made out of PVC pipe. Makes stringing the bow, unstringing the bow, and shooting a lot more fun. And then I've got the bow wrapped on here, or the prod wrapped on with paracord. So now I'm going to show you guys how to span this bow. It's really simple. All you do is you place the stirrup on the ground, put your foot in the stirrup, grab the string, pull it back, and there it is. It's a good idea to always put the safety on first, because sometimes as you're bringing it up, you might bump this against your leg and set it off. Now it's ready to go. Just take your bolt, put it under the clip here, and it stops it right before you get to the string. And this clip holds it in pretty well. Now you can't swing it around and bounce around upside down like the other crossbow. It's just not going to hold it in that well. But it's enough to forward, up, side to side a little bit. And when you're ready to shoot, you just move the safety out of the way, take aim. There we go. Here we are at 10 yards. Here we are at 20 yards. Alright, my target is right down here. So I'm going to be shooting in your direction, first at 10 and then 20 yards. Here we go. I'd love to show you guys how to build a crossbow like this one. 100 pounds, but a lot more compact and something in a more medieval style. But here it is. Alright, so I wanted to try something just for fun. I don't know if you can see the target. It's kind of that whitish speck off in the distance. We're back about 35 yards from the target. And I'm crouched behind this stump. So I'm going to be shooting at the target, and then I'm going to put you guys over there so you can see what it looks like when I'm shooting from here. But we'll see if I can make this shot from behind the stump and with some brush. So here we go. Nailed it. Today I'm going to be showing you guys how to build a 100-pound medieval style crossbow. It's going to be very similar to this one, just a couple of small changes. And it should be a lot of fun. So, here we go. Here's a basic list of materials and supplies you'll need to build this 100-pound PVC crossbow with me today. As we go on in the video, I'll go over each thing in detail and also offer suggestions to alternatives in case you want to try something a little bit different. First, we're going to start by building the stock, also known as the tiller. Today I'm using a 2x3 piece of lumber. This is just softwood lumber. I believe this is Douglas fir. You want to make sure to find a dried and stable board. You also want to make sure that the board is straight and that the grain, as well as the growth rings, run straight. You want to avoid any major knots or if you do have any knots, make sure they sit outside of where we're going to cut away, or in thicker portions that aren't really necessary for the structural integrity of this. If you have a couple of pin knots back here, it's not going to make a huge difference. But anything up in this area where the rail is going to be and where all of the load of the string is going to be, you want it to be very strong. I also highly suggest you use a board like this, which is flat sawn, so that when you hold it this way, the growth rings are running up and down. And you want these to be as dense as possible. The more dense your board, the better it will hold up. Now, if you wanted to, you could also make this out of 2x3 hardwood lumber, which would hold up a lot better. But just make sure that the same growth ring and grain rules apply. You want this to be strong, regardless whether you use something soft like Douglas fir or pine, or if you're using something like maple, oak, or hickory. Well, what we're going to do now is just kind of lay out our basic template. It's a really simple template, not too complicated. So first, from the end, you want to mark 6 inches, and we're going to use this for 2 measurements. First, you want to mark in 6 inches from the end, and then right in the middle of the board. This is going to be where we're going to drill a 3/4 inch hole that's going to be used to tie the bow or prod onto the stock. You're also going to be making a 6-inch mark at the bottom here, and we're going to be using that to taper the rest of the stock. Now you can really do whatever you want here. From about here to here, the shape doesn't really matter. You can make it more sweeping, you can thin it out a lot more. What you do is entirely up to you, but I like this. It's very simple, though it is a little blocky looking. I like it. From the end, you want to mark, or on the end, you want to mark 1.5 inches down. Take that mark and the 6-inch mark, take a straight edge and draw a line from here to here. That will give you this nice taper to your stock. Next, you want to go 16 inches from the front, and this will become the full draw length of our bow. You want to go 16 inches from the end and place a line. And then you want to draw this line, you want to mark this line 1/2 inch down and then out at a roughly 45-degree angle. You can see right there. That's going to be where the string sits when you load the crossbow. And also you want to mark, I've just drawn a circle here. Basically you want to drill a 1/2 inch hole here, but you want to make sure that the edge of the hole lines up with this edge here. You don't want it to cut into the edge. You want it to sit just behind so that we can round this out a little bit. That way it will reduce string wear and also make the bow shoot a little smoother. So now that we've got our markings, we're just going to go ahead and drill our 2 holes. This one's going to be 3/4 inch. This is going to be 1/2 inch. And it's easiest to drill it now before we start cutting things away. Here we go. Now when you're drilling your holes in the stock, you can use whatever you want. I'm using spade bits. And one of the things that I like to do when using a spade bit is actually drill into the piece until the very point of the spade bit pokes out the other side. Then I turn off my drill, turn the piece around, and then drill from the other side. That way I don't have any run out and both sides are clean. So you can see we've drilled our hole in the front and our hole for our trigger pin. So now I'm just going to go ahead and with a saw cut out the rest of my stock. Just this piece, and this front piece here. Here's what the stock looks like when everything's cut out. Now when you're cutting this out, it's important to make sure that it's wide enough. You don't want it to be too wide or you're going to weaken these portions here. But you want it to be wide enough so that our bow or prod will fit in here. And you'll also be able to fit smaller prods in here, but you won't be able to fit anything larger. And if this is too small, it may be difficult fitting the prod into the stock later on. So just to make sure that you cut this large enough, take the little piece that came out when you cut it with your saw. I used a coping saw. You want to turn it so that the height of the board, you can see this is how it came out. You want to turn it so that the height of the board becomes this width. And as long as you can push this into about halfway, you've cut this large enough. These rounded corners will help us to align the prod once we start tying it down. Now we're going to be working on our bolt channel or bolt groove. This is fairly simple, and this will take a little bit of doing. If you're good with a chisel, you can easily chisel this out, though that can be a little tricky on some softwoods. If you've got a sharp tool, it'll work fine. I'm going to show you guys how I go through here and make my bolt groove. So the first thing that you're going to do is measure the center here, the center up here, line them up, and then make a straight line for you to follow that runs right through the middle. The straighter this groove is, the more accurate your crossbow is going to be, the more consistent it's going to be. So here we go. To cut the bolt groove, I'm going to be using a file and a piece of rough sandpaper. This is 60 grit sandpaper, and this is a mill file, though you could also use a flat file. All you really need is something with sharp corners and a 90-degree sharp corner. So, to start, I figure out where this line is, and I take the tip of my file and I try to line it up as best I can, and I use it kind of like a chisel. I'm just trying to follow this line and make a groove. Now it's going to take some adjusting as you go, because this is going to try to follow the growth rings here, and the growth rings, while they are fairly straight, are not truly aligned with my groove here. So I just go back and forth, working slowly, trying to make sure that I get this thing aligned properly. This is going to be the most tedious part, just initially getting this groove started. Now that the groove is slightly established, you can take your file and actually place it into the groove and just run the file in the cutting direction. You don't need to do this a lot, just a few times to really get this established. I'm going to go in both directions. You want to make sure that you're working evenly so that this groove is nice and even. Now that the groove is established, we can start working on really making it deeper. When it's finished, we want it to be a little over 1/8 of an inch deep. Not too deep so that when the string comes up it goes over the bolt, but deep enough so that the bolt tracks well, holds in here well, and that the string contacts the bolt about midway. So you have a couple options here. You can wrap some sandpaper around your file here, or you can get a scrap block of wood. As long as it has 90-degree corners, you can place it into your sandpaper and use it as a sanding block. Now I like using this because it's kind of hard to get into this end with a file. It's also kind of hard to manage this piece of wood. And you also want the sandpaper to be creased and sharply creased along this whole edge, otherwise it's going to really round out your groove in parts and make a nice sharp groove in others. All you do is you line it up in your groove and sand it. So I'll show you what this looks like when it's done. Alright, so now the groove is pretty much finished. To complete it, you just want to take your sandpaper, instead of going straight in, you want to kind of lean it over to each side. You don't need to do that a lot. You can see this side is now nice and rounded and this side is still a little angular. You just want to rock from side to side. Just to round out this groove. There you go. Now the groove is done. All that's left to do is to sand this down smooth so that we can finish it. Alright, here's the finished stock. So I went ahead and sanded everything smooth. I rounded off the edges. Any sharp edges, I just rounded off. You also want to make sure that when you get right in here, you want to really round off these corners. And you want to round off the corners in all directions. You don't want any sharp edges here because that's going to cut up your string and really reduce your string life. And this type of lock inherently has a lower string life, so you're going to need to replace your string or at least monitor and maintain your string more often. But it's not a bad thing and you can work around it. Just make sure that this is nice and smooth and everything's rounded off. Once we finish this, I'm going to actually re-sand it and re-smooth it and apply finish a couple times to harden up this wood. You can see everything's nice and rounded. So now I'm going to apply a wood stain. Now normally I use leather stain or leather dye or shoe polish depending on what color I want, and then I apply my finish separately. One thing to keep in mind is that shoe polish usually has waxes in it, so this won't be compatible with a lot of finishes, but I usually use shellac, and shellac goes on pretty much anything. So I'm just going to go ahead and apply my shoe polish. Here you can see right off the bat looks a lot better. So I'm going to go ahead, finish this off, and I'll show you what it looks like. I've gone ahead and finished up the stock. I finished staining it and I sealed it with 3 coats of shellac. You can see, I think it came out really nice. So I'm going to let this dry, and while we're letting it dry, we're going to work on the different attachments. We're going to work on the trigger lever, the safety, the stirrup, and the bolt clip. So here we go. To build all of our extra pieces like the bolt clip, the safety, the trigger, and the stirrup, you're going to need a 1/2 inch pipe. Now I suggest you use something like this, which is gray conduit, because it has the UV resistance built in. You don't have to worry about painting it, you don't have to worry about it getting brittle over time or anything. Plus it's nice, this is going to get scratched. A lot of these parts are going to get kind of scuffed up if you use this a lot, and so there's no paint to scratch through, no finish to mess up. It'll always look good, and if it starts to look a little ragged, you can just sand it a little bit and it'll look just like new. Now you'd want to use the conduit if you want to keep the price of this bow down, say around or under $10. But for me, I wanted to do something a little different for this particular build, so I'm using 1/2 inch furniture grade PVC. It's nice because it also has UV resistance built in, but the color choices are a lot more varied, and I like the idea of having a crossbow with all red parts. So this is what I'm going to start with. What you're going to need to do is cut your pipe into 4 pieces. The first piece is going to be 14 inches long, and this is going to become the main trigger lever. You're going to need 2 pieces that are 6 inches long. One is going to become the safety, and the other one is going to become the bolt retainer or the bolt clip. And then your final piece is going to be 23 inches long, and this is going to become the stirrup. To make the trigger lever, we're going to need to flatten the pipe completely. So before I do anything else, I'm going to go ahead and heat up the pipe flatten it in my flattening jig until it's completely flat. I'm also going to do the same thing to all my other pieces because all the pieces need to be flattened. Now that the trigger lever is flattened, you're going to mark 1 inch from the end and then 4 inches from that. So 1 inch from the end and 5 inches from the end. These two marks should be centered because we're going to use a 1/8 inch drill bit. We're going to drill a hole here and here. This way we can attach it to the tiller. Now that the holes are drilled, you want to go onto the other side and you want to heat up about the last 2 inches of this lever. Just heat it up gently. And then once it's soft enough to bend, we're just going to bend it upward a little bit. Just so that when you grip the trigger, you have something to hold on to. And you're not just pulling up on a straight bar. So, here we go. That's about good. We don't want to heat this up until it puffs out. So now, you just want to bend it out a little bit, not too much. Make sure it's somewhat lined up with everything else. Alignment is not really important with this. There it is. So that way when the trigger comes down, it's a little easier to lift up. So here it is. Now I'm just going to go ahead, round this side off, and then I'm going to grind this to a point. And I'll show you what that looks like. Really, you could do whatever you want here. You could leave it square if you want. These parts, this end and this end, it's just for looks. So now that your trigger lever is done, we're going to attach it to the stock. Measure 7 inches from the front end of the stock, and that's where we're going to align our trigger bar. We want this to start 7 inches from the end. To attach it, I'm using 2-inch Phillips head screws. You can use whatever you want, but I like these because I can put them in, I can take them out, move them around if I want, and it means that I can take everything off of this and move things around, switch things out if I wanted to. So it really makes things easy that way. But you can use whatever fasteners you want. So I'm going to go ahead and screw these in. I'll show you what it looks like. Now that the trigger lever is attached, we're going to work on our pin. I'm using a 1/2 inch dowel. This usually works really well. Now, if it doesn't fit, you may have to sand the dowel until it fits. You want it to fit fairly loosely. You see it moves in easily, it moves around fairly easily because you don't want this to get stuck. You want there to be some movement. And it's okay if it's a little on the loose side because when we put the bolt retainer up here, it will keep this from coming out. So you don't have to worry about that. Now you just want to place it until it contacts the lever and then just go ahead and mark it right at that level. You want to mark this flush with the rest of the stock. So now that we've got this, you want to cut that off and then round this edge a little bit. I'm also going to finish it with the shoe polish and a little bit of shellac, and I'll show you what that looks like. And here's the finished pin. You take it and drop it in. Now it's ready to go. Now we're going to work on the safety. Now that we have the pin as a reference, we can figure out how high we need to have the trigger be when the safety is engaged. And for this next part, you need one of your 6-inch pieces that's been flattened. Pick a side and just heat it up gently. And then we're going to bend it at a 90-degree angle. That way we can create just a little bit of a ledge or a little bit of a hook. Then we'll be able to file that down to fine tune it so that it sits with the trigger perfectly. Here we go. now you take this and you just bend it up at a 90-degree angle. You want this to be around a quarter to a half an inch tall. We'll be grinding off a little bit of this. So I've gone ahead and ground it flat and also rounded off the corners. So now what I'm going to do is take it along the bottom of the crossbow and just push it up right until the front of the trigger pin. Push the pin all the way down. You can see it's kind of far. I've already gone too far, and that's good. That means we can adjust this back. So now you just pull back on the safety. You can see the pin is starting to come up. And you just want it to go just to where the pin is just a little bit above the bottom of that V. That's about as far as the string will push it. You want it so that when the crossbow is spanned and the string is here, that there's not a lot of tension. There's a little bit of tension on the safety from the handle lever, but not a lot, so that you can remove the safety without it making a lot of noise or being extremely difficult. As you can see, right now it's fairly tight. So now that you've done that, you want to take a pen and mark right behind the handle, about a quarter of an inch behind the end of this handle here. You just want to put a little X there, and that's where we're going to drill our hole. And then you want to trim the handle about a half an inch to 3/4 inches behind that. That way when this comes down, it will not impede, this end will not impede with the trigger lever. If you left this too long, it could cause this to not go down all the way, so you wouldn't be able to use your trigger. I'm going to go ahead and cut, round, and drill this hole, and I'll show you what that looks like. Gone ahead, drilled my hole, and trimmed the back. Now to place this, you just do the same thing we did earlier. Push the safety all the way up the lever until the pin comes down, and then just pull it back until the pin is right where you want it to be. Perfect. So now you take that, line it up, and then just drill right there. So I'm going to do that, and I'll show you what that looks like. Alright, here's the finished safety. To use it, you just swing this bar around, lift up the handle, and there you go. When you want to use it, you just flick this out to the side, and there it is. To make the bolt clip, start off with the other 6-inch piece of PVC. I've gone ahead and flattened it. I've also made 2 lines here. What you want to do is have the center section be half an inch wide. We're going to cut these 2 side pieces off, so we have one piece of half an inch wide PVC to work with. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this out, and I'll show you what it looks like. Alright, I've gone ahead and cut out my piece. I went ahead and sanded it smooth on all sides, and I also rounded the front and back. Now what you want to do is mark the center, because we're only going to be heating up half of this. So to do that, you just take your heat gun, and we're going to make one bend and a nice curve. So first, we're going to make a bend. So you're going to heat up right at that center point. Okay, so you see how it's starting to curl up? The side that's curling in used to be the inside, and that's going to become the top now. So what you want to do is just bend this at a fairly hard angle. You can do 90, or you can do a little less than 90. Now once that's cooling, you want to heat up the end here. And you just want to pull it upward while it's cooling. So now that you have this, heat up this middle portion and we're going to bend it back down. So here we go. So now you just want to bend it, and then you want to bend it just a little bit lower than the, let's see, there we go. So you want to bend this so that it ends up being just a little bit lower than the height of this here. Take a little bit of, there we go. That way when we put this flat against the crossbow, there'll be some spring tension here, right off the bat. So now that this is cooled, mark about 3/8 of an inch from the end here, and this is where we're going to drill a hole so that we can screw this onto the crossbow. We've gone ahead and drilled the hole. So now you want to take it and line it up on the crossbow so that this clip is situated right above the pin. And this bend is right where this notch begins. The way this works is when the string comes back, it will slide under this front of the clip, and then it'll slide under here. Now this clip will also keep the pin in place, because if this wasn't here, the pin could just fall out. This also makes it easy to take the pin out if you need to change it or make any adjustments later. This is also going to create a little bit of a stop, so that when you put a bolt in here, it'll come up and it'll hit the back end here, and it won't go all the way behind the string. That'll help prevent misfires. So you just want to line it up. Figure out where the center is, and then you just want to take a screw and screw it in place. I'm going to do that and I'll show you what that looks like. Here's the finished bolt clip. And to use it, you just take your bolt, put it in, and then you can see it helps stop it so that it doesn't go behind the string. It also holds it in place so you can move it around, forward, back, side to side. And if you don't want it here, you just move this out of the way. Here it is. Now we're going to work on the stirrup. Here I have my piece of pipe that I flattened. This is the 23-inch piece. You want to make some additional markings here. You want to make 2 markings 4 inches in from the end, then 3 inches in from those 4-inch marks, so 3 inches away, and then 2 inches away, and that will leave you with a 5-inch center section. So now you just want to take this and heat it up, and we're just going to heat it and bend it into the stirrup shape. So here we go. So you want to fold it, not quite 90 degrees, just a little bit out from there. You just want to let it cool. Once it's cool, we're going to heat up the other side. Alright, you want to heat up the other side. Alright, once the other side's been heated, you want to just make sure that the angles are pretty consistent. This way the stirrup will be nice and aligned when you put it on your bow. Now it doesn't have to be perfect or exact unless you want it to look perfect, because even if it's a little off, it'll still work fine. So now that this is cool, I'm going to go ahead and heat up one side. I'm going to work on one side at a time. So first, I'm going to heat up at this 2-inch mark. Now, I want to bend this over so that this 3-inch mark sits about at the center of this 5-inch mark. You can see that. And this is going to be the shape of our stirrup. So once this cools, we're going to heat this side up, or we're going to heat this, bring it back, then we're going to heat this side, and then heat this side and bring it all together. Now I'm going to heat up this portion. Now you want to heat this and form it back. This is going to become our stirrup. Once this cools, we want to heat up this section right here. So now you want to bend this back. You want to match this angle with this piece here. Just kind of match them up so that they're in about the same direction, and let it cool like that. Now go ahead and heat at the 2-inch mark. Now you take this and you bring it in. Just kind of push inward. And there it is. So now there's just a little bit of adjustment that needs to be done down here. But just make sure that this top portion is lined up, because everything else can be adjusted in the next step, where we actually get this ready to be fit to the crossbow. Now that this is cool, we're going to heat up all the way around here until it's soft enough where we can actually take it and twist it so that this will be able to attach to the bottom of our crossbow. Well, here we go. Right, what you want to do is grab both ends together, make sure they're nice and even, and then you just want to go ahead and twist. It doesn't really matter what direction you twist, because this will all work out. Just kind of over twist a little bit and let it cool. There it is. So you want to go on here and mark from 2 inches from this end and 3/4 inch from this end. This is where you're going to drill your 2 holes. Now when you're drilling the holes, you want to make sure that this is pulled together as much as you can pull them together, and as close together as possible, so that when you drill your hole, it keeps these two together. We've gone ahead and drilled the holes. Now what you want to do is line it up with the end of the crossbow just until this first twist clears the end. You want it to sit nicely against the bottom of the crossbow. And then you just take your screw, line up the holes, and attach this. So I'm going to go ahead and attach this, and I'll show you what it looks like. Alright, now that I've attached it, you can see it's not perfectly aligned yet. So I'm just going to go ahead and heat this up so that I can line it up. Now alternatively, you could just attach the stirrup on before twisting this and then just heat it up and twist it on the crossbow. But I find it a little less cumbersome to do that beforehand. But that's another way of doing it as well. So here we go. Alright, so you just want to twist it from side to side. And just adjust it so that it sits evenly with the rest of the stock. I want it to rest flat. There it is. Now, the stock or tiller of the crossbow is all finished. The only thing we have to do now is build and attach our prod. So, here we go. Now that the stock is finished, it's time to work on the bow portion of the crossbow, also known as the prod. Now on this bow, the prod is made out of 1-inch Schedule 40 white plumbing pipe. Now today I'm going to be using the furniture grade pipe, but if you wanted to keep the price lower, say around $10 or so, you could use a piece of white plumbing pipe. You're going to need a piece of pipe that's 30 inches long. So this is a 30-inch long piece of 1-inch Schedule 40 PVC pipe. If you want the bow to be lighter, just make it a little longer. I do not suggest you make this prod any shorter though, because we're getting close to this pipe's maximum draw length. Since I'm using furniture grade pipe, this is what I'm going to start with. Once you have your pipe measured out to 30 inches long, you want to mark the center at 15 inches, just so you know where the center is, so we can flatten using the center and align the bow up to the stock using the center. Now we're going to taper the limbs of our prod. What we need to do is heat the prod up 1/2 at a time and then press it to a taper using one of these jigs. Now this is one of my favorites. It's an adjustable jig, but you can also make a jig with fixed spacers. You just want to make sure that your spacers are 1 inch tall for this particular build. Today I'm going to be using my heat box back here, but you can do this with a heat gun, torch, over a fire, over a stovetop. Any heat source will allow you to work this pipe. So I'm going to flatten this and I'll show you what that looks like. Once your pipe is hot enough and flexible where you can flatten it with a finger, you're going to take it, bring your flattening jig to the center of the handle mark, and then press it down. Once the pipe is cooled, you remove the jig, and here you have a nice taper. So now you just have to go and taper the other side. Here's what the pipe looks like after it's been tapered. So now we're going to heat up the last 4 inches of each limb and give the bow a little bit of a recurve. Now this recurve is important because it'll actually help us string the bow up. So all you want to do is heat up the last 4 inches until it's just soft enough to form. Alright, so now you just want to form these, just a little bit of a recurve. Doesn't need to be too heavy. And we want it just a little further down. Alright, there we go. There's our recurve. So you want it to be about 2 inches of recurve. As you can see, there's about a 2-inch distance between this tip and the rest of the limb. Just want to make sure that it's even with the rest of the limb. Now you just need to heat up the other side and match this recurve. A little trick to help you match your recurves is to place the bow upside down on a piece of wood or a flat board. This way you can really gauge and see if both of your recurves are even. Then you can make any adjustments if needed on this board. Now that the recurves are done, we're going to heat the center of the bow and shape it. We're also going to be adding some deflex to this bow, and the deflex is going to help make the bow more stable. Now we're going to sacrifice a little bit of speed for stability, but in the end, having a very stable bow is a good thing when you have a crossbow. And this works the same for both this colored pipe and white pipe. So all I'm going to do is heat up about 4 inches of the center. Alright, so now you've seen it's puffed out a little bit. So we're going to flex this back. You can get your board. And with your board, you want to make sure that there's about 3 inches. So let's form this by hand for a little bit. You want to make sure that this transition is nice and smooth. And you're aiming for about 3 inches of deflex here. So you want to take this and make sure that there's about 3 inches of deflex. Now while the pipe is still warm, you want to take it and actually force it down to one side. You want to sort of center, or you want to flatten one side completely. This will allow the string to track closer to the center, or closer to the top of the bow. And that will allow the crossbow to fire a little more true, or shoot more true. Just put a little more deflex. And that is about 2.5 to 3 inches of deflex is good. There we go. Alright, I've gone ahead and finished off the tips. To do these, all I did was I measured in 1/2 inch from either side, and that gives you a piece here that's a little less than 1 inch. Now it's still kind of a wide tip, but it looks a little better than just leaving it straight. Using a knock file or a tile saw, you want to cut knocks into the sides here. Now I'm cutting my knocks about 1/2 inch from the end, and I want them to be about 1/4 inch or so deep. So this is going to come out to about 3/4 inch between these two. You don't want it to be any thinner than that, or you could snap the tip off. You want this to be pretty robust. So I've gone ahead and cut these on this side just so you can see what they look like. From here, I'm going to go with sandpaper, round them off. You want to make sure that there are no sharp edges here. That'll really help save your string and increase its life, and also get rid of any stress points here that could cause this to snap. I've gone ahead and rounded out the knocks. So now the prod is finished and ready to go. All we have to do is attach it to the tiller. So to do this, you could use any type of strong cord. I'm going to be using paracord. And you're going to need about 15 feet of cord to wrap the prod on. Before we attach the prod to the tiller, we're going to want to protect this center section against abrasion from the tiller itself and from any outside things, because this is the most vulnerable part of the bow. If this part gets damaged bad enough, the bow will break. You can do a lot of things with this. You can take a piece of leather and stitch it on. You can wrap it with leather, wrap it with cord, just as long as the cord, when wrapped around here, isn't large enough so that it doesn't fit into the stock. Now if you need to, you can always sand this and make this a little bigger, but you want to keep this about the same size. So I'm going to be using some paracord with the inner strands removed, so some gutted paracord. And I'm just going to wrap around here. You're going to need about 10 feet of paracord to do this wrap. So here I have my center mark, and I've marked 2 inches from either side, giving me a total of 4 inches. You want this to be even because you're going to be using this as a reference when lining up the bow in the tiller. But it's really simple. You just want to start right underneath that first mark and just bring this around. And just overlap it like that. And you want to wrap tightly, but just wrap all the way down to the end. So once you've gotten down to about 4 or 5 wraps to the end, you just want to make your final wraps lightly and over your finger. This way we know, or we have some extra in order to finish up this wrap. So, looks like 5. Let's see. Looks like about 5 will do it. So once you've gotten down to here, you want to take your loose end, pass it up through, and then starting from the top, you want to use this and just wrap over this loose end here. Let's bring it up. Just wrap as tight as you can. Alright, once you've wrapped all the way, just pull this loose end through. Now you want to twist as hard as you can. Just go ahead and twist it just to make sure that it's nice and tight. And then pull the loose end through. Push everything together. Make sure it's lined up. You can see it's nicely between our 2 markings here. So here's our wrap. I just want to go and trim the loose end. There it is. Alright, I'm going to show you guys one method to wrap the prod onto the stock. First thing you want to do is make sure that the stock is aligned. It should look fairly even as long as both limbs have about the same degree of taper and look pretty consistent. Any kind of fixes that we need to do can be done after the bow is attached. So any adjustments in tiller can be done later. So we're just going to attach it now so we can work on the bow and get everything working properly. I've got my 15 feet of cord. I'm going to start by taking this and bringing it through this hole. And just hold on to it. And you take this, you bring it up, over, and then across. So you can see I brought it up and across the front. You see right across the front. Now you want to pull that pretty tight and wrap up. So you want to wrap up and around one full rotation, or one full wrap, one full turn, and then holding this cord tight still, I'm going to bring this back over the front and then into the hole. As you can see now I've got one wrap all the way around here and then two going across the front. Pass that through the hole again. Alright, make sure that's nice and tight, and should be pretty tight. Okay, so now we bring this up, and just like we did before, we cross over the front. So now we've got two wraps on one and one on the other side. Bring it around the front here again, and over this limb. You want that to be pretty tight. So one full turn, and then you want to bring this across. Once you've done that, I'm going to pull it as tight as you can, and then bring it through the hole. Now as you're going, you'll notice that it doesn't feel very tight. We're going to be doing a little additional wrap just to tighten everything up later. So it's not too important how tight it is right now. Now that you've got that, you should be able to let go of your loose cord. And then, coming up from this side, you just want to go around the front. And you want to go on the inside of the other wrap. That will help tighten the other wrap and lock this one into place and keep it from sliding out of the way. Then you just take this and run it back through the hole. We're going to do the same thing on the other side. So bring it up on the inside of the other wrap. Pull that tight and then pass it through. And then that's the basic wrap. This is plenty strong and will hold this prod in place. It does give you a little bit of give, so you can twist this around and move it around as you want, but it will hold it in place from shot to shot, and it's not going to come apart on its own. Now that you've done that, what you want to do is go from the side here, take your cord, and then pass it all the way under. I like to bring it back just to lock it in place. And what you're actually doing two things here. You're locking this thread in place, but you're also giving yourself a little bit of gap, because we're going to wrap this all the way down. So now you want to pass this through again, one more time. Pass this through one more time, and then bring it up to the top here. You want to give one more wrap. So this is a third wrap. And once you've done this third wrap up here, and again you want to do it on the inside, take this cord and then pass it underneath, so inside, and you'll have one bundle here, and pass it around that bundle. And bring it around, and then pass it through and under the other bundle. See, like that. Now you want to pull as tight as you can. This is going to tighten up your entire wrap. So the tighter you can get this right now, the better the wrap will be. You just pull as tight as you can, and then you want to lift this whole bundle past this underneath. Pass this whole bundle underneath, and then you can start to wrap. So I'm just going to wrap all the way around, all the way until I get to the bottom. And this is what it looks like when you've wrapped down to the end. Once you get down to here, just pass the cord through the hole here. Now to the other side, so you can do the exact same thing. Just wrap it up, over, do that figure 8, and then wrap it down. So I'm going to do that, and I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. Now that you're done wrapping, everything should be pretty tight. I mean, this isn't going to come off on its own. These ends can be left loose, and I like keeping them loose so that if I need to, for some reason, rewrap it, I'm not going to cut any of this. That way, if I need to rewrap it later, I have cord on hand or on the bow to do any repairs. So I can take it off and then rewrap it and still have extra to work with. So what I'll do with this end, this loose end here, is I'll bring it under and push it under these wraps. This thing's pretty tight, so it's a little easier said than done. Okay. Take this loose end and pull it down and then stick it into the hole. I'll take this end, bring it through, and now I'm just sort of going to loop it around and around, just like I did that other piece. Just press the cord under this side, bring it down as tight as I can, and then pass it through this hole. And you just want to keep going back and forth until you've used up all of your extra cord. Alright, once you've come to your final pass, you want to make sure that this last loop that you made is a little loose. Pass the other side through. And then you just want to make it as tight as you possibly can. It's kind of short, so it's not going to get too tight. And then you just stuff the loose end into this hole here. If you need to get it out, you just kind of pull this end and you can undo the wrap. So just kind of stuff it in there. Your wrap is all done. Now that our prod is attached, we're going to be making a string. Now, I'm going to be building a permanent string for this bow out of dacron, but for right now, we're going to build the initial string out of paracord. You could use paracord as the finished string. Now on a bow like this, you may want to do that, because the way it works, it really wears strings down fairly quickly. And so having them made out of paracord, you can easily make a bunch of strings and take them with you. And when the string starts fraying, it's not a big deal. Just take the string off, put a new one on. And on that topic, I'm also going to show you guys how to make a very simple rope stringer for this bow so that you don't have to really struggle trying to string it. It's fairly straightforward. But first, we're going to make our string. So you want to take one end of your paracord, and you want about, let's say, a 5 to 6 inch loop. And then tie an overhand knot. You just bring it over, around, and then through. And then that should slide over the tip of the limb here. So now, you want to put it into the knock, and then bring the string over to the other knock. stretch it a little bit, and then right where this is, right where the other knock is, you want to reach back and then tie another loop. Now this string may end up a little long at first, but we can just tie knots into it until it is the proper length. That way there's less guesswork. That way we have a good idea of what we're doing without having to do a lot of measuring. So now you want to slide this string down onto this limb and pop that. I'll turn it around. And then pop this into this knock. It's looking good so far. I'm just going to take a knife and cut this loose end. There it is. So now we're ready to string this bow up for the first time. To do that, we're going to build a rope stringer. So I've got some rope here. When you're picking rope, you want something that is very wide, a larger diameter rope. This is a 1/2 inch diamond braid rope, very soft. You want something that's soft and that's going to be easy on your limbs, especially if you paint your prod. This is going to keep from scraping off all your paint every time you string the bow. And you'll see that the recurves come in handy when doing this. So you want to make one loop, and you want it to be about 1 foot long. Just go ahead and give it a simple overhand knot. And that will give you about a 6-inch finished loop. Now, what you want to do is slip that over one recurve, bring it back around over the butt of the stock, and over to the other side here. You can see what we've done. This is going to be used to string your bow. So now from here, you want to make a judgment. Grip it about 1 foot, like we did the other one. 1 foot, and then just guess. We can tie knots in this as well. So go about 2 to 3 more inches down. Take this end, tie a knot, and again we want about a 6-inch finished loop. Okay, now you just take this end here and cut it loose. Let me take a little doing here. Woo. Okay. Now you take your stringer, hook it up on the bow, string the prod. You want to figure out which loop is larger. That would be this one. So you want to put the smaller loop over the side that has the string on it already. And I suggest you have the loose side on your dominant hand because you're going to need to manipulate it a little bit. You take the rope, bring it around the front of the tiller here, or the top part, and bring the other loop to rest in this recurve. And you just kind of want to pull this back a little bit. Now that your crossbow looks like this, put your foot in the stirrup, make sure the ends are in the recurves, and lift. And now bring your string across and it won't reach. So that means you need to take this down, just pick a side, tie a knot. Now that your knot's tied, slip it over the recurve again, make sure they're both out at the recurves, and then with your foot in the stirrup, draw back and up, set it onto the back of the stock, and still too short. But you get the idea. So I'm just going to keep tying knots until the string is the proper length. Alright, there we go. So you finally get this loop onto the prod. Once your string is in the knock, let the cord down. There we go. And my brace height's kind of high, but you just want to push up. That will stretch out the string. We want about a 4-inch brace height. So just pull back on it so that the string will settle into its final length there. There we go. And so it's looking pretty well balanced. So now we can go ahead and string it up or pull it back for the first time. Make sure to put your safety on. That's important. Put your foot in the stirrup and draw the bow back. And there it is. And the tiller looks pretty good on this too. So now you just want to gently draw this back and bring it down. There it is. So now you could leave this string like this, and this will make a pretty decent string, easily replaceable. But I'm also going to show you guys how to make a nice dacron string for this. Now that we've got the string on it, I'm just going to give it a little test shot. So put the safety on, put your foot in the stirrup, span it back, drop your bolt in, then release the safety. There we go. I just went ahead and weighed this. The prod is pulling 110 pounds right now. It'll probably drop about 5 pounds once it's broken in and settled down. So a little over 100 pounds on this one. Here it is. To make a new string, we need to take this string off. So you just want to do the same thing you did when you put it on. Take your stringer, and I ended up having to tie 3 knots in this one. But once you've got your stringer on here, you want to actually bring it back. I'll move back a little bit so you can see. Bring the edges back to the center of the recurves and draw it up. Set it on here. Take your string off. And then drop it back down. And there you are. Alright, so now that the string is off, we have a good template and we know how long to make our dacron string. Especially now that this nylon string is stretched a little bit, we know a good length to start to put on this bow. And this string was actually a little shorter than I expected, so we can make our string a little bit longer than this. But generally you want to copy this length now that you have a good reference. It's also a good idea, now that you know the length of your stringer, make a couple more just like it in the same length and keep it with you. That way, if you're out shooting and the string starts looking like it's frayed, you can take it off before it breaks, switch it out. And it's always a good idea, if you're going to store this for a prolonged period or if you're going to keep it in a hot car, unstring it first. That way you won't have any surprises later on. But here it is. And here's the paracord string we took off of the bow. Now, while paracord does have less performance than other string materials, it still works, and it'll work fine for this bow. If you're happy with the paracord string, you can leave it on there. But I like the looks of a Flemish twist, so I'm going to be making one of those. I have a whole bunch of string videos, and I'll put the links in the description. And I've gone over how to make different jigs and also different methods of making a string. Today I'm going to show you guys the string that I make the most. It's just a simple Flemish twist bordering on making rope. So I'm going to be using some Dacron. This is a polyester material, and this is a Dacron string material. You can also use Dacron fishing line, that works really well. And this is about a 35-pound test. So if you get 35-pound test fishing line, and make sure that it's Dacron and not monofilament nylon, this will work really well. So the first thing I need to do is measure out my strands. So first you want to take your existing string and just measure from loop to loop, like this. Now you want to add to that measurement 4 thumbs up. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Now you take this measurement and you want to pull out the number of strands you need for this string. Now this string, I'm going for 26 strands. So that's 13 strands per bundle. So I'm going to make 2 bundles of 13 strands, and I'll show you what that looks like. Now that you have your 2 strands, you want to go ahead and hold it from the end. You want to measure from the end about 6 inches, or 1 thumbs up. So right there. And this is going to be our splice. Down here, we're going to need to figure out how much we need to make our loop. So since we're drawing around a 1-inch pipe, just bring your string around a piece of 1-inch pipe, and that's how long your loop needs to be, at least for one side. So go down to the bottom here, and then we're going to start twisting. Now I'm twisting counterclockwise. I'm twisting toward myself first. So I'm twisting counterclockwise. I keep twisting and twisting and twisting until this wants to start wrapping over itself. You can see how it's getting all twisted. I'll grab about the same amount and I try to put the same number of twists in. This doesn't have to be perfect, but you want it to get pretty close. Then you grab both strings, both strands, stretch them out as much as you can, hold them tight, and then together you want to twist them. So twist them together. And soon the twist that you put in here will take over and the strand will come together. Now you can see that. You want to do the same thing up here. Just twist, twist, twist. What you're doing is you're basically creating a counter-twisted rope. The rope wants to unravel, or the strands want to unravel, and so they're actually twisting into each other, and that's what locks this thing together. Alright, just double checking. Okay, we need just a little bit more. I'd say maybe about 1 inch more or so. Bring that around, and that's perfect. So now you want to take your 2 ends and bring them together. You see they meet right in the middle there. So now you work one half at a time. Take this longer strand, and now you want to twist it clockwise or away from yourself. Doesn't have to be a lot of twists, just a little bit. You want to do the same thing with this. Clockwise, a few twists. Then you bring them together, make sure they stick together, and then you twist them counterclockwise. And now you're going to do what you did when you made this loop. Just keep twisting them until they want to start doing that. So just twist it up, then put that on the side. Do the same thing here. Clockwise twist, clockwise twist, put them together, counterclockwise. Twist it until it starts to kink. Bring both sides together, hold them together, and then twist. And there you go. Now to continue this loop, just go ahead onto the bottom, twist counterclockwise or toward yourself, twist the other tab toward yourself, and you want to go about an inch beyond where the splice ends. You can see right in there. And there's one loop. Now, you take the rest of your string and you want to, first of all, you want to just pull it, make sure everything's nice and straight. Now add some counterclockwise twists. So I've put 13 twists. Do the same. Take the ends, pull the string together, and then just let it twist together. Now this will help hold the string together, and it'll also help us when we set the string up, or the second loop up. So now you need your other string. You're going to match up your loops, and then you're going to go down to the other end and figure out where the other loop starts. Now what's nice about the paracord string is that the dacron is going to stretch initially. The amount that the paracord stretches will be about equal to the amount of initial stretch in your dacron string. So you want to make this new string exactly the same as the paracord string. So you go up here to where the loop starts on the paracord string, and you want to match it. So you're going to start there. And this string was a little short, so I'm going to make it just a touch longer. Take your strands, and then you want to do counterclockwise twists, so twist toward yourself. Once it starts kinking like that, just hold it on the side and do the same to the other. Once it starts to kink, bring them together, and now twist it. Once it starts going, they'll twist together all on their own. Hold it tight. Now, I'm going to do a little bit more. Just twist, twist, twist. And it's really simple. When you twist the individual strands, you twist toward yourself. When you twist the bundle, you twist away. Let's see. How are we doing? I want this to be about equal, if not a little smaller. It's actually bigger, so I'm going to take a couple of twists out. There you go. Perfect. Now, we want to do what we did on the other side. So we have a lot of extra length here. Now, you don't want to cut this right away. What I like to do is untwist the string a little bit so you have two sides to work with. And then go ahead and pick down here about 6 inches, clockwise twist. Then take your larger strand and you want to put your clockwise twist into this. Now, the reason why you put the clockwise twist in is because otherwise you would end up with a string that likes to unravel itself. Doing this will save you a lot of headache as you build your string. Okay, so got a little bit of clockwise twist in there. You want to bring them together. Make sure they're joined together up there. Make sure they're even, and then counterclockwise twist. And do that until it starts to kink like this. I'm going to go about 6 inches. Put your clockwise twist into that. Put them together, counterclockwise. Let's see, gotta make sure they're even. Okay, counterclockwise twist until it starts to kink, like that. Then you want to bring it together with the other strand. Now, twist them together like this. Now you just untangle your string. Make sure this little tab is out. Make sure both of these little tabs are no longer in the string area. See, just like that. And then counterclockwise on the main strands. Counterclockwise, counterclockwise. Pull these tabs away. And clockwise. Now you go to your other end of the string and you want to just grab the string and pull down. What you're doing is moving these loops. Oh, sorry, it's hard to see. You want to hold this strand and then pull down. You're moving the loops or the twist from one side to the other. Pull the string out, give it some twists. And there you go. Whoops. And here we go. Here's the finished string. I've gone ahead and put the new string on the crossbow. And it's pretty much perfect. The brace height is right about where I want it to be. Maybe a little higher than I want. But this string will stretch out just a little bit, so it looks good. Now that I know that this is good, I can go ahead and cut this tab off. The reason why I left this tab is because if the string were too short, like really too short, then I could take this apart and lengthen it. But now that we know that it's set, I can cut these off. Now that the string is trimmed and ready to go, I'm going to put a center serving on here. I'm just using the normal nylon serving thread I normally use. On a crossbow, you typically want to use something other than nylon because nylon will fray. But I usually cover the serving with a little bit of electrical tape afterward anyway, just to prolong the life. So it's not going to be a big deal. This is very economical stuff. So one of the benefits to having a prod that's fairly loosely bound here is we can actually move it like this. When we move it like that, we can serve our string. So to serve the string, you're going to need your serving thread and a server or a serving jig. And I'll put a link in the description to a serving jig I show how to make using a tie plate. This is pretty much the same thing, except instead of using a tie plate, I just used a piece of PVC that's been flattened. So start out by laying some serving thread on the string. And I like to give myself about 4 to 6 inches of serving. I just want it to be equal. So you want to take your server and then bring it over, bring it over, bring it over. Once you got about 3, grab them bring them over to where you want it to start, and take your end piece here and pull it tight. Okay, now lay it along the string and you can start serving. You're basically just wrapping this string with thread. Once I've covered about an inch, take my end piece here, the little loose piece, move it over to the side and continue to wrap. And I'm just going to go all the way until I reach the other end. Now I've wrapped down to about an inch from the end. So now what I like to do is pull out some thread and bring the serving jig, a little more thread than that, and bring the serving jig over and behind. You can see it's behind the string. Now I bring the serving jig up and inside of this little loop I made. And I just keep wrapping with the serving jig. It's a little difficult at first. As you keep going, it gets easier. And so since I was about an inch away from the end, I want to reverse wrap about an inch worth of thread. There we go. Now I take that, bring my serving jig back over here, and then, okay, so let's see if you can see this. So now I'm wrapping over that thread, and this is taking threads from this side and putting them over here. You can see like that. Okay, so now I've wrapped all the way around. Take my serving jig and pull that loose cord through. Pull it all the way through. And there it is. There's the served string. So now the string is all done. I just need to trim it. And then I'm going to wrap it with a little bit of electrical tape. So here's the string all finished up. You can see I put a little bit of electrical tape here. Not a lot, just one wrap. I just do that to help keep wear down on the actual string. When that gets worn through, it's easy to replace. If the serving gets worn through, then you have to take the serving off and replace it. And if you neglect it all and it goes through the tape, through the serving, and through the string, then you've got to replace the string. So these things just help prolong the life of the string. You can also put a little bit of electrical tape on a paracord string to help lengthen the life of that. Here it is, the string's all finished. Now that you've finished your crossbow, it's time to build the bolts for it. Now today I'm going to be building a bolt just for this crossbow. This same bolt shouldn't be used in heavier poundage crossbows or compound crossbows, as it may not be able to handle the stresses that those bows will put on it. But this will work just fine for our crossbow. I'm starting with a 3/8 inch poplar dowel. I've cut this to 16 inches long. I like to have it to be at least as long as the draw, if not a little longer. So about 16 to 18 inches is good, and if you're going to use commercial crossbow bolts, I would suggest 16 to 18 inches. When selecting your dowel, you just want to make sure that the growth rings are straight and that the grain is as straight as possible. So now the first thing that I like to do is grind the taper in my tip. I'm going to be using archery target points, so I'm putting a 5 degree taper here so that it'll fit into standard glue-on archery points. Now if you were using, say, a PEX pile or something else, or tying in a point, then it really doesn't matter. Just taper it however you like. I'm going to taper it, and I'll show you what that looks like. Alright, I've gone ahead and I've tapered it. And I also went and sanded this back area just so I have a nice smooth transition, so it's not a hard transition from here to here, because I'm going to be using a smaller point. Now if you were using a point 4 3/8 inch dowels or 3/8 inch shafting, then you don't have to do this as drastic. So now that this is done, I'm going to prep the back end of the bolt. Now this is important. You want to locate the grain orientation or the growth ring orientation on this dowel. This way the growth rings are laying down in layers like this. So I want to cut across those layers when making my knock. Now I'm going to do something of a half moon knock on these. So you can see this is where the growth ring lays flat. So going from this side, I'm going to take a half round file and just file right across the face of the knock. Now you could just leave this back end flat and that'll work too. I like having the half moon knocks, but that's just a personal preference. And these knocks also ensure that the string is always going to hit this bolt in the strongest grain orientation. So you can actually see from the end, you can see those little lines. We want to run across those. That's where the strength is going to come from. Now that that's done, I just go ahead, take my file, and round off the back end a little bit. And there it is. It's finished. Now I'm going to fletch the bolt. To do that, you're going to need some sort of fletching jig or fletching clamp. This is a simple one, just made out of a piece of PVC pipe that's been flattened. And then I cut one edge off and sanded it flat, so you can see it opens a little bit. Now, there are specialty fletching jigs just for crossbow bolts, but I usually just fletch them by hand, especially a 2-fletch like this is fairly simple. So you take your jig, you take your feather, slip your feather in, whoops. And I've got a little marking here so I know how far in to put it, because I'm going to line this up with the back of my bolt. You can use glue or pretty much anything for this. You could even just tie it down. I'm using fletching tape, so I'm going to go ahead and apply the tape. But with glue, the same thing applies, especially a super glue. You just apply the glue, just a thin bead of glue. Once you've got the glue applied, you just do what I'm about to do with the tape. Alright, to apply this, you want to figure out how the knock is oriented. And this is the way it's going to sit when it's on the crossbow. So we want the fletchings to come out of the side. So you just take it and line it up on the back and then line it up on the front. Now, because I have right wing feathers, I'm going to put a bit of an angle to it. I don't know if you can see that this back end is further back this way, the front end is further that way. That way when I put this on, you just push, and if you're using super glue, you just want to hold it for about 30 seconds until it sets. And then you just slide the clamp off. You can see it's not very noticeable, it's fairly minor, but you can see there's a little bit of a twist here. That'll help the bolt stabilize, but these bolts don't really twist a lot. They mainly sort of fly like this. So now that I have one feather on, I'm going to go ahead and glue the other feather on. Here's our bolt all fletched up. So now I just have to go ahead and glue the point on. Now I'm going to glue the point onto the bolt. I'm just going to be using a glue-on archery point. This is just a field point and some hot glue. So just heat up the glue. Apply it to the point. Heat up the glue that's on the point. Press the point on. And now what I like to do is heat up the point itself. Once the point gets hot, it will help it seat a lot better. There we go. Now you just need to press it against something hard. There it is. Just remove the excess glue. Your bolt is ready to fly. So here's the finished crossbow. Here's some bolts. So I'm going to shoot it real quick for you guys. There it is. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye. But today I'm going to shoot this for you. This is a 100-pound crossbow. The prod is actually pulling a little more than that. It's actually pulling 110 pounds. But for simplicity, we'll call this a 100-pound crossbow. I'm going to go ahead and shoot it for you guys. Here we are at 10 yards. Here we are at 20 yards. Here we are at 20 yards. Alright, my target is right down here, and I'm going to be shooting in your direction so you can see how it flies. I'm going to be shooting at 15 and 20 yards. Here we go. here it is. Thanks for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed the build along and the shooting video. I'll see you guys next time. Bye. Just for fun, I'm going to see how quickly I can shoot 5 bolts. And I'm not going to use the safety. I'm just going to load it and shoot it. And I'm going to do this from 5 yards, so hopefully I don't lose any bolts. Here we go. There it is. Not too bad. I mean, it was only 5 yards, but hey, I'll take it.